There's a profound truth that often gets buried beneath our desperate attempts to be seen, loved, and accepted by others. Until you respect yourself, no one else will. Carl Jung recognized this fundamental reality, not as a harsh directive or ominous warning, but as a simple, unchangeable law of human psychology. We project onto the world exactly how we treat ourselves. When we move through life carrying self-doubt, we inevitably invite doubt from others. When we walk around seeking permission to feel worthy, we essentially surrender our souls to others, hoping they'll grant us what we refuse to claim for ourselves. The painful irony is that you could dedicate your entire existence to proving you're good enough, worthy enough, lovable enough. You might exhaust yourself in relationships, careers, and conversations where you subtly beg for validation without even recognizing it. Yet until you turn inward, until you look deeply into your own reflection and decide, without conditions, without pleading, without justification, that you are inherently enough, the world will continue mirroring your hesitation back to you endlessly. Respect isn't something you must first earn from others. That is something you cultivate, nurture, and fiercely protect within yourself, long before the world catches up. This isn't arrogance. It's not ego-driven pride. It's not pretending you've achieved perfection. It's acknowledging that self-worth was never meant to be a prize awarded by society. It's an internal decision, a quiet, unshakable standard that declares, I will no longer negotiate my fundamental value with anyone, not even with the parts of myself that still question it. Today we'll explore the subtle ways we abandon our self-respect and the small yet powerful actions we can take to reclaim it, not as a performance, not as a strategy to impress others, but as an act of radical honesty with ourselves. Because, ultimately, no relationship will ever rise higher than the one you have with yourself, and until you respect yourself deeply, genuinely, and consistently, nobody else truly will. Why do you continue trying to prove your worth to others? It's a confronting question, isn't it? One that most people spend their lives avoiding, masking it with endless achievements, applause, and the relentless pursuit of approval. Yet beneath all this striving exists a quiet, persistent voice whispering, maybe if I accomplish more, they'll finally see me. Maybe if I become good enough, they'll finally stay. But where did this need originate? Why does the concept of being enough always seem connected to external recognition? It typically begins early in life, when love, attention, or security felt conditional. When the child you once were discovered that being accepted sometimes required diminishing yourself, performing, or suppressing authentic emotions. And so, unconsciously, you developed a life script that insisted, my value depends entirely on how others respond to me. Every smile you chased, every rejection that wounded you more deeply than it should have, these were all scenes from the same unconscious narrative. A narrative where you're never truly the author, only a performer waiting for applause that never completely satisfies. And here's the uncomfortable reality. No amount of external validation will ever heal an internal void. You can ascend every professional ladder, secure every title, collect every compliment like precious treasures, and still feel that hollow emptiness inside. Because when your sense of worth depends on external sources, it remains perpetually vulnerable. One cold glance, one forgotten invitation, one misunderstanding, and suddenly you're questioning your very right to exist with dignity. But what if you never needed to prove anything? What if that was never your purpose? What if your existence itself is already miraculous, requiring no performance whatsoever? Imagine the burden that would lift if you permitted yourself to be enough right now, without requiring anyone else's approval stamp. Imagine how differently you would make choices, form relationships, and direct your energy if you lived from a foundation of grounded, unshakable self-respect, rather than anxious striving. The truth is, people who truly matter will never demand that you prove your worth. They will recognize it because you recognize it. They will reflect it because you embody it. And those who require proof, who make you leap through hoops to be deemed sufficient, are revealing an essential truth you need to hear. It was never about you. It never was. Their inability to acknowledge your worth doesn't diminish it. It exposes their limitations, not your inadequacy. The day you stop trying to prove yourself marks the beginning of reclaiming yourself. And from that moment forward, everything, absolutely everything, begins to transform. The prison of external validation. There's a subtle form of imprisonment that most people inhabit without ever recognizing it. This prison has no visible walls or chains. It doesn't announce itself with shouts or slammed doors. It simply whispers, gently but persistently, "You're only valuable if they say you are." And before you realize what's happening, your self-worth no longer belongs to you. It becomes the property of others' reactions, approvals, applause, or silence. External validation is so seductive precisely because it feels tangible and immediate. A compliment, a promotion, a social media like, an approving nod. These brief moments can feel like concrete evidence that you're enough. They're easy to crave because they provide quick emotional relief from that persistent inner doubt. But they're dangerous exactly because of their fleeting nature. They bind your sense of worth to circumstances entirely beyond your control. One moment you're riding high on affirmation, the next, a casual criticism or an unanswered message plunges you into a spiral of self-doubt. This trap runs deeper than merely seeking praise. It lies in constructing your entire identity around being perceived in specific ways: kind, successful, attractive, intelligent. When your sense of self becomes a performance requiring constant validation, you lose connection with who you truly are beneath these carefully crafted layers. You begin shaping your choices not according to what feels authentic, but to what might win approval. And gradually, imperceptibly, you forget how to listen to the only voice that truly matters, your own. Have you noticed how exhausting this way of living becomes? How you question your instincts because you fear judgment? How you say yes when you mean no just to avoid disappointing someone? How you remain silent when you yearn to speak, all to maintain peace? Each small act of self-betrayal might seem insignificant, in isolation, but collectively they erode your self-respect from within until one day you awaken to discover you've become unrecognizable to yourself. Yet many remain trapped because they've bought into the powerful illusion that accumulating enough approval will eventually make them feel complete. But it won't. It never will, because no amount of external validation can repair internal self-rejection. It's comparable to attempting to fill a bottomless pit with handfuls of sand. No matter how much you pour in, it will never be sufficient until you address the leaking from within. This is why genuine freedom begins the moment you remove your worth from the marketplace, when you stop offering it up for negotiation, when you decide that your value isn't subject to debate, not based on your achievements, your failures, your appearance, your mistakes, or your history. When you understand that validation from others can be appreciated but never depended upon, the truth is you will disappoint people. You will be misunderstood. You will not always be chosen. And that must be acceptable, because if you dedicate your existence to avoiding rejection and grasping For approval at all costs, you will never truly live. You'll merely survive, quietly suffocating beneath the weight of invisible expectations. But when you cease living for validation, something remarkable occurs. You begin making decisions based on alignment rather than approval. You start speaking truth instead of seeking applause. You begin creating a life that feels right to you, even if it doesn't appear flawless to everyone else, and the respect you once desperately sought, it begins flowing naturally because it's now anchored in authenticity rather than performance. So ask yourself with unflinching honesty, where in your life are you still holding your worth hostage? Who are you still hoping will finally provide the validation you've been pursuing? And what might happen if you simply decided today that you no longer need it? Genuine self-respect isn't loud or demanding of attention. It is quiet, powerful, and steady. It's the calm certainty of knowing in your deepest self that you are enough, not because others declared it so, but because you finally claimed this truth for yourself. The power of saying no. There comes a defining moment in every person's journey when they realize that saying no isn't rejecting others, it's affirming themselves. A simple word of just 2 letters that carries the weight of entire lifetimes spent pleasing, apologizing, accommodating. For many, it's a word entangled with fear. Fear of disappointing someone, fear of facing judgment, fear of losing love. But what if the real loss was never in saying no? What if the true loss has always been in all those moments you said yes when your deepest self was screaming no? Learning to say no often represents the first tangible act of self-respect. Not the theoretical kind, not the kind you affirm with words, but betray through actions. It's the moment you draw a quiet, invisible boundary, not to harm others, not to be difficult, but to protect the sacred territory of your own life, your energy, your dignity. Consider how frequently you've agreed to something that felt fundamentally wrong. How many times you've sacrificed your time, peace, and values simply to avoid conflict or to maintain an image of being agreeable or easily lovable. Each of those yeses might have earned you temporary approval, but they extracted a price measured not in applause but in quiet, accumulating self-betrayal. Saying no is deciding to stop paying that cost, and it extends beyond boundaries with other people. It encompasses boundaries within yourself. Saying no to habits that deplete you. Saying no to distractions that pull you from your purpose. Saying no to internal voices, suggesting you must earn rest, love, or worthiness. Every time you say no with clarity and intention, you reinforce a deeper yes. A yes to yourself, your truth, your peace. Naturally, it feels uncomfortable initially. You might experience guilt. You might question your decision. You might even lose certain relationships. But here's something rarely acknowledged. Anyone who abandons you because you respected yourself was never truly offering love. They were proposing a transaction, their approval in exchange for your compliance. And when compliance ends, the illusion dissolves. Authentic relationships, whether friendships, family connections, or romantic partnerships, aren't threatened by healthy boundaries, they're strengthened by them. When you say no with kindness, but firmness, you offer others a gift, knowing the authentic you, and you give yourself the gift of living with integrity rather than fear. Ask yourself, where have you been withholding your no? Where have you silenced yourself to maintain external peace while waging internal war? What would it feel like to finally honor yourself enough to say, without anger or apology, no, this isn't for me? Because every no offered from a place of self-respect plants a seed of freedom. Freedom from existing as a mere reflection of others' expectations. Freedom from the exhausting burden of constant performance. freedom to stand tall, not because you fought the world, but because you finally stopped fighting yourself. And perhaps this is where genuine self-respect truly begins, not in grand declarations, but in the quiet courage of a single word, the boundary between the persona and the true self.